Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and welcome to the show, y'all. Now listen to me. Jerome's lawyer has gone to see the DA because he believes that if the DA listens to the truth of the situation, that this could be deemed an issue of self-defense. And Jerome won't have to receive any more time. He won't have to receive any more time. But the DA doesn't want the wrong message to be sent to other people in prison or on the streets that you can get away with killing a man and nothing happens. So when he takes it to his boss man, the attorney general, he says to him, he said, listen to me. Whether he was in self-defense or not is an issue for the jury to decide. But he said, don't argue against that. Let that be included in the argument. Let them submit their defense. We just need to submit our case and leave that to the jury. So the DA that's prosecuting the case gets back with Jerome's lawyer and he tells him, he said, listen to me. You argue self-defense, and I won't put up too much of an argument against that. And let the jury decide this. Because my boss don't want to send the wrong message. And the wrong message would be that a man inside of prison could stab another man for whatever reason and nothing happened. Because there are no witnesses there. There are no witnesses. And everybody will be trying to say it's self-defense. But you have a compelling case. And he says, let the jury decide. So Jerome's lawyer comes back to visit him. And he tells him this is the strategy. And Jerome is nervous. He's afraid that things are not going to work out for him. He's afraid. Now, he hasn't used any drugs in the months that have passed by because he swore that he would give it up. But the pressure is becoming too much for him to bear. And now he's talking on the phone to Tasha, and she can tell something is off here. She could tell something is wrong. And she tells him, hold on. Don't you give up. Don't you give up. So when she gets off the phone with him, she's nervous. She's afraid that something's gonna happen. She don't trust what she just heard. So she calls the prison and she asks to speak to the warden. And when the warden gets on the phone and talks to her, she tells him what she thinks. And she asked him to listen to that phone call and judge for yourself. Because I'm asking you to go get him. Separate him from the compound. He's not gonna like it, but that's what he needs. Because she's afraid that he's gonna relapse. She's afraid that he's gonna make this situation worse. So the warden agrees with her. And he sends his people to get him right away. And they take him and they lock him up. And they go by every 15 minutes to talk to him, see if he's okay, checking on him. And they can see that he's struggling because he's afraid. He's afraid. Now the trial gets delayed. And when the trial gets delayed, Brandon is on a break. And he has the opportunity to come home. And now, in the time that they've been waiting to go to trial, Brandon has been playing basketball and he's been on TV a couple of times. And his dad, Jerome, has seen him on TV and he's excited about that. That's the only joy he's been having in his life, is watching his son play ball. But he starts to believe that he's an embarrassment to his son. So when his son comes home and he says, I'm coming up to see you, Jerome tells him, don't come see me. I don't want to see you like this. And Brandon says, see you like what? What's wrong? I'm coming anyway. When I get there, tell him you don't want to see me if you don't want to see me, but I'm coming anyway. So Brandon and his mother, they make the long ride up there, but they got a surprise for him. They got somebody that they want him to meet, that they was going to wait and tell him after the trial was done. They didn't want to put nothing else on him. So when they get there, they all sitting in the VG. And when Jerome comes out and he hits the corner, he sees Tasha, he sees Brandon, and he sees this young girl. He sees this young girl. And Brandon has his arm around her. And this young girl, he looks at her and he sees that her stomach is bulging out. And now he has this look on his face of confusion. He thinks that she's pregnant, and as he's walking over there, he can't take his eyes off of this beautiful young lady. And he keeps looking back at her and his son and Tasha, and now they know that he's thinking, what is this? Who is this? So Tasha, she walks towards him. And she said, are you okay? And she kisses and hugs him. He kisses and hugs her back. And he says, yeah, I'm okay. And he looks at her and he said, what's going on? And she said, we're going to let Brandon tell you. And he said, let Brandon tell me what? And Jerome is standing there. He's shaking. His hands are shaking. And Brandon takes his hands and he said, Daddy, I want to introduce you to somebody. I want to introduce you to my girlfriend, my fiance. And he looks at her and he said, how you doing? How are you doing? And she said, I'm fine, sir. How are you? And he said, son, is it something that you need to tell me? And they all laugh. But he's not laughing. He don't know what, he's not sure of what's going on, but he is sure of what's going on. And Brandon looks at him. And he looks at his girlfriend, his fiance. And he had discussed with her before they got there that he wanted to let his daddy touch her stomach, because he felt as though this would help him understand how important he is to the family. And when he looked at her, he took his father's hand and she nodded, and she took his hand and she put his hand on her stomach. And Jerome, he started to cry. He started to cry. And he said, is this what I think it is? And she said, this is your grandson. It's your grandson. And we're going to name him after you. So Jerome fell to his knees and he started crying because he couldn't believe what was happening. He couldn't believe what they were saying. It was so much love in that VG that day. The other people in the VG, they were looking and watching. And they all started clapping and telling him, congratulations, congratulations. And he fell to his knees and he's crying. And Brandon told him, stand up. Stand up, Daddy. Because your grandson gonna need you. He gonna need you. And you gotta fight. You gotta fight back. So he stood up. And he said, I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna fight. So they had a good visit. They talked about all different sorts of things, and And he asked him 1,000,001 questions about how they met and what's going on with that and all of the things that he would always want to ask and talk to his son about, but never had the courage because he felt so ashamed of his situation that he felt like he had abdicated the right to be his father. But today was an affirmation that Brandon wanted his father in his son's life. And with his son, they were going to make sure that this cycle of dysfunction, this cycle of abuse, this cycle of addiction was going to be broken. They were going to make sure of that. This was it. So when Jerome went back to his cell, he called his lawyer. And his lawyer took the phone call. He said, I was on my way out of the office. I wasn't going to be able to talk to you, but I want to tell you something. We got some good news. And Jerome said, what's going on? What's the good news? When are we going to trial? And the lawyer said, we can avoid trial if you take a plea. He said, I don't want to take a plea. I want to fight this. I want to stand up. I want to tell my story. And his lawyer told him, you can tell your story when you take this 3-year sentence. It's going to be ran concurrent with the time that you're doing. And he said, explain to me what that means, ran concurrent. And the lawyer explained to him and said, well, you got 12 years at 65%. You're going to do 6 years, which is a few more years that you have to do. He said, but the 3 years is not going to increase your sentence to 15. It runs in with the 12. It'll start running immediately. And you won't have to do any more time. And the state is not going to oppose you on parole when you go up. Because they understand, they've looked into this, they've investigated, and they found out that the guy that you killed in self-defense, even though it is unfortunate that anybody have to die for the nonsense that we think about when it comes to crime, they understand that this guy had a reputation of extortion, that this gang member had a reputation for doing this. And yes, even though it's unfortunate that anybody has to die in this life, when it comes to things like that, that they felt like that you were in self-defense. I just need you to tell me to make the deal because they've offered it, and it won't get any better than this. It won't get any better than this. So Jerome said, does Tasha know? He said, no, I was on my way over there to tell him. He said, let me tell him. So his lawyer said, we got a deal then. And Jerome said, we got a deal. We got a deal. And the lawyer knew that something was up. He knew that he sounded like he had another lease on life. He sounded like he had some fight in it. He said, what's going on? He said, I got a visit today. And I'm going to be a granddaddy. He said, well, congratulations. And he said, they're going to name him after me. And the lawyer said, congratulations. Congratulations. And he said, I'm going to go make this deal. He said, I'm going to get off his phone and I'm going to call Tasha. And I'm going to let them all know. And then I'm coming home. And he said, yes, you are. He said, you got a couple more years to do, but you're coming home. And he said, don't give up. You got to keep your nose clean. Don't give up. And Jerome told him, I won't. I will not give up. I will not give up. So they got off the phone, and Jerome called Tasha. And he told her that he had just got off the phone with the lawyer and that he was only going to get a 3-year sentence, ran concurrent. And he explained all of that to Tasha, and she just was screaming, overjoyed. So Brandon and his girlfriend, his fiance, they came into the room and they said, "What's going on? What's happening?" She handed the phone to Brandon, and Jerome told him what had happened. And he just screamed, "Thank you, God." Because he was a strong believer. And he knew that things were going to get better from this point on. Things were going to get better from this point on. And he was happy for his father. And he knew that his grandson, that his father's grandson was going to be okay. He knew that his son, Brandon knew that his son, was going to be raised in an environment free of drugs and alcohol. The cycle had been broken. The cycle had been broken. And that can happen for you. If you're listening to this and you got that type of problem, get back in the game. Get back in the game, y'all. And let me explain something to you when I tell you. When I say get back in the game, I'm talking about the fight, the real fight. Not the criminal world. The real fight. The fight to live a happy, positive, productive, law-abiding life. Get back in that. Don't walk away from that. Get back in the game. Please. Because this ain't the life. I don't wish this on anybody. I don't. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.
I've been trying to breathe underwater.